Good evening and a very warm welcome to everybody, to all the ladies and gentlemen, to everybody who's watching us live today. This episode of the Curious Mind series is a very special one. So, anybody, any one of you who's watching it from whichever part of the globe, whether it is India, whether it is Southeast Asia, whether it is from the UK, probably late night in Australia, this is a special one, and we thank each one of you for logging in. Before we kickstart this episode, firstly, a warm welcome to our guest speaker, Captain Kishore Chinta. How are you doing, Captain?
Good evening, Vikram and Jai Hind. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening.
Thank you, Jai Hind, to you too. And in exactly the same spirit, before we kind of start with some of the questions and this discussion for an hour, in the memory of the people who lost their lives, whether it was the 10 days back, the unfortunate plane crash, or whether it has been the helicopter crash, or the recent incidents which have happened, we will be online keeping a minute's silence starting from now. Okay. In the spirit of us moving on, well, we cannot move on from a tragic incident like this, but in the spirit of us moving ahead at this point in time, we will continue with our show, and we are really grateful to have somebody like Captain Kishore joining us on this podcast live. The recent incidents in the aviation sector has shaken all of us, including me. And whilst people have resumed back to flying, traveling from one destination to another, there is still this lingering fear deep inside. What if I was on that plane, AI 171? Or what if something happens on the plane on which I am flying? Fear is something which has no limit at all. And the faster we conquer our fears, the faster we move ahead in life. Well, to counter some of these demons in our mind, we have Captain Kishore Chinta on our podcast today, who has willingly agreed to share a pilot's perspective in a very candid, unfiltered, and honest manner for all of us to hear and understand that at the end of the day, a pilot is a human too. Welcome on board, Captain Kishore. and how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling good, Vikram. Of course, the aftermath of the tragic crash of Air India 171 continues to haunt each and every aviator. When I say aviator, I count everyone, not just the cockpit crew, the cabin crew, and everyone involved with the flying part of it. So it will remain with us for eons to come. And but the show must go on. That's how aviation it is, inherently fraught with risk, but of course still happens to be the safest mode of transport. No matter what anyone says, the statistics speak for themselves.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you very rightly said, Captain Kishore, the show must go on, and it is still the safest mode of transport, on which I do have a curious question later part in the discussion. Now, for our audience who are watching us live, either on LinkedIn or on YouTube, as always, we stick to the essence of the podcast, which is we have only agreed on to the title with the guest speaker, which is Captain Kishore, and he is not aware of the questions which are going to be shot at him at this point in time today. Therefore, his response is purely going to be based on his experience, expertise, knowledge, and his personality. At the same time, this is a great opportunity for you to ask any questions by typing into the LinkedIn YouTube comments section for me to display them and ask Captain Kishore for his insights. We all have had a lot of questions about the crash, around it, what happens through a pilot's journey. So, this is your opportunity, and that is exactly why the Curious Mind series episode has been scheduled. Just one request to all our viewers for this particular episode. Let's be sensitive to the questions around the AI 171 crash, as investigations are still in progress, and Captain Kishore is not an official spokesperson on the incident, but can definitely share his inputs based on his personal capacity only if needed to clarify from a pilot's perspective. And now, before we start off, I'm sure you can go on to LinkedIn and you can go on to Twitter or X. And Captain Kishore is a very dignified officer, a pilot. Let me share a very, very brief introduction. He is an alumni of the National Defense Academy. He has spent 10 years flying fighter jets for the Air Force. Now he's an aviation consultant, corporate pilot, and an avid general aviation enthusiastic, along with being an adrenaline junkie. Now, for all what he has achieved in his life till date, four lines are far too less. But the essence of this podcast or this episode is to ask him questions and get answers, as much as information as inputs we want. So let's begin. Are you ready, Captain Kishore?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Like many of us, was flying a plane a childhood dream for you, or something which got evolved as you started firming up on your career plans? Just to get a little bit of background about you.
I wouldn't call it a childhood dream. It's something which evolved as we moved forward. I had a bunch of friends who were constantly into war comics, and as we grew up, uh, at some point of time, I guess the interest in aviation definitely envisaged from those war comics. A very dear friend of mine who went on to become a test pilot in the Indian Air Force and now is also a corporate aviation pilot, joined the National Defense Academy about 6 months prior to me. And I think I got inspired once he joined that, yes, this was a career. And in fact, at that point of time, I had already joined engineering and I left that to join the National Defense Academy. And I have no regrets whatsoever. The journey has been fantastic. And as you know, I'm living my second life. So I feel blessed. Uh, so this has been a fantastic journey in the world of aviation.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And then, how did the transition happen from being in the Air Force to eventually moving into the commercial space? If you can share a little bit about that with us, that would be interesting.
In fact, I didn't really plan to be in the commercial civil aviation sector. When I left the Air Force due to personal reasons, I was probably going to take up a blue collar job, do an MBA. I'd given my GMAT while I was awaiting the results of GMAT and probably enrollment in good MBA institutes outside of India. I started taking classes for ab initio pilots in the civil world because one of my colleagues from the civil aviation world felt that I could utilize my time best by instructing these pilots. And I started off that way. And within a couple of months, the reality strikes you that this is what I was meant to do. And
Mm-hmm.
my place is not in a boardroom. And I probably would be happiest getting back into the cockpit. And like people say, for most people, the sky is the limit. But for those who love aviation or love flying, the sky is the home. So I realized that my home is definitely flying airplanes, and that's what my reckoning is. And I started off flying small beach crafts and probably never looked back after that, never joined an airline. I, as on date, hold 9 type ratings in the civil sector,
Wow.
9 different airplanes in the civil, and I've flown uh, 8 different airplanes in the military, including UAVs. So,
Wow.
spanning a career close to 30 years, I've flown close to 16 different flying machines. It's been fantastic, and the learning never stops in this sector of career. So it's been fantastic.
Extremely interesting, extremely fascinating for somebody who wants to be a pilot, and extremely inspirational. I mean, for somebody to watch somebody like yourself have such a vast experience across different kind of aircrafts in itself means quite a lot. Moving on a little more, can you share with us whether as a pilot flying a fighter jet or flying a commercial plane, what does a normal day look like in a pilot's life? Also, what differs between a short haul or a long haul flight?
So back in the military, I would say we were more of a mission first kind of flying. Uh, an average day would start pre sunrise, where you would get up, get ready, and go for a early morning med briefing before sunrise, and thereafter followed by a flying briefing in the crew room and the briefing room for the pilots. And then we would start off for the first sortie. In most probability, would always be at the first flight of the day.
Hmm.
On the average, you would fly 2 to 3 sorties. Thereafter, you would call it a day. And on the average, 2 or 3 times a week, you would have night flying. So this is peacetime flying in a fighter squadron. So we train and fly hard for Monday to Friday and once in a while on Saturdays, and let our hair down on the weekend. So as the saying goes, you fly hard, party hard, and stay fit. So that's an average life of an Air Force fighter pilot. And as you move to the civil sector, it's more mission, less of mission oriented and more of safety oriented, because you have, unlike a fighter jet, where it's just you flying and you are responsible for your own life. In the commercial aviation spectrum, you are responsible for every single passenger who's sitting behind over there in the cabin.
Yes.
So the sense of responsibility is heightened, and you stay safe. Obviously, the passengers behind you remain safe, and of course, also the comfort part of it, especially in the corporate or general aviation. Passenger comfort is absolutely premium for us. A passenger feels uncomfortable once, they'll never come back to us. So that's the kind of clientele we fly. I've never been in an airline, but of course, I keep hearing enough people crib about customer service. The sector of flying I do, customer service and client feedback is paramount for us. The customer is the king. We fly VVIP passengers, the who's who of the country, celebrities, you name it, and we fly them all. So that's the sector I've been flying in for the past 19 years, almost 20 years now, and I've enjoyed flying to far-reaching places. At one point of time, probably I was among the 2 or 3 pilots who were cleared to fly to every single hilly airfield, starting from Kabul to Leh, Srinagar, uh, Shimla, Kullu Manali, uh, Kathmandu, Paro, and Bhutan. I've flown to all of them, and it's been a enriching experience. In fact, one of the airplanes I flew was actively involved in doing air ambulance back then, and I still remember a lot of pilots would shy away from flying into Afghanistan back then in the mid 2006 to 2010. And I was just out of the Air Force. Most pilots would want an enhanced insurance coverage to fly into Afghanistan to do medivacs back then. And I was of the opinion, hey, what's the big deal? The risk factor is probably lesser than flying back in the Air Force. I was probably a little maverick big back then. But yes, so my first international flight was to pick up a US Department of Defense contractor from Herat in Afghanistan, who was involved in a landmine blast. Because the aircraft from US couldn't fly in due to insurance requirements and other clearances. So we flew in from India all the way to Herat, picked up that guy, dropped him to Dubai for the aircraft from US to pick him up. So once you enter the Afghan airspace back then, of course, now I haven't been there in probably a few years, but most of the airspace was then controlled by the ISAF, and most of the controllers were either American or Canadian or correction British mostly. So it was like flying back in the Air Force. You had dedicated sanitized corridors to fly into. The helicopter gunships would sanitize the airspace from ground to probably 4,000 to 5,000 feet. Then the fighter sweeps, and at the higher levels, the drones would be sanitizing those corridors. So it was a part like flying into the military airspace. And once you were on the ground, it was mostly military aircraft back then. So that was my first exposure to international flying. It was trial by fire, but I have flown to every single airfield in Afghanistan. Every single airfield.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
unique. That's quite unique.
yeah. I've had the distinction of flying to Iraq to pick up again a Pakistani uh, electrician who was on contract, and he was diagnosed with TB, I think. And so we flew in with a team from Apollo all the way to Balad Air Base in Iraq to pick up this Pakistani gentleman and drop him to Lahore and fly back to India. So yeah, I've had the privilege of flying Dalai Lama, a whole lot of celebrities. So it's been a checkered career in the commercial airspace, and wonderful.
Wow, sounds interesting. Sounds very fascinating. Let's continue on to something much more, like you spoke about safety in a commercial pilot or as a private jet. Now, before I move on to that question, again, to our audience who are watching this live, this is also your opportunity to either share your love or write your comments or ask curious questions to Captain Kishore, because here we are with him and you can ask him anything under the sun from a pilot's perspective. And I'm sure he'll be more than glad to answer to you at this point in time. While continuing on the safety side of it, if you were to explain to a 10-year-old kid how safe is being safe flying in an aircraft in a non-technical terms, what would it be?
So, safety in terms is a perspective. You know, uh, I might feel safe enough to cross the road in a dense traffic, like in Old Delhi, where
Mm,
vehicles are crisscrossing, and it's an art. Trust me, crossing
mm,
a road in probably Mumbai or Delhi, I might feel safe enough. Someone coming from another city like Hyderabad or Chennai would come to Delhi and say, "What the heck is happening over here?" So they might feel
mm,
unsafe. So it's a perspective. At the same time, the statistics state that the probability of an accident is less than 1 to uh, probably a billion flights happening across. So I'm sure even a school-going kid can do the math on that, on what is the probability of an accident happening, and leave alone an accident where lives are lost. The probability is, uh,
far too
less than
less.
one. Yeah, it's tremendous statistics which prove that this is the safest mode of transport. Yes, there is an inherent risk when a flying machine gets in the air. There is an inherent risk. At the end of the day, it's a machine. You can ask a guy in California in an AI-powered, autopilot-empowered Tesla, and still crashing and uh, still believing in the system. You still have a bunch of people in the Bay Area still driving Teslas with autopilot on and uh, trying on those very same roads, despite n number of crashes. So yes, there is a risk, but notwithstanding that, it still continues to be the safest mode of transport.
Okay. Okay. And we will cover that a little more. I'll take your word for it. Obviously, it is what has happened recently. There are enough reports to say that it is once in a billion kind of an occurrence. But yeah, it does shake people up. It does kind of deter the confidence a little bit to say, is that really safe? And there are obviously this generation of kids around who have not probably seen what has happened, and obviously they have this very inquisitive mindset to say, are we really safe when we fly in a flight? And obviously a lot of people feel. But thank you so much, I appreciate. We have Vignesh who's asking the next question, and I'm going to put it right up there. Captain, could you please share your experience of landing and taking off at Paro? I've read that only very few pilots are authorized to fly at Paro.
Good evening, Vignesh. Thank you for the question. Yes, Paro continues to be one of the most challenging airports to fly into. It's a purely visual flying airfield. There is no landing aids. You basically enter the Paro Valley uh, just past the Paro VOR, uh, and thereafter you practically are, along the river, meandering through at various checkpoints along the river. You pick up few points and navigate yourself, and the final turn is through about 60 to 70 degrees. You basically don't have the runway in sight when you're doing your turn onto the finals and continuing to descend. You probably have less than 2 miles of the finals before you can align yourself with the runway and adjust your speeds and height to make a landing out of it. So the only pilots who are allowed to land over there without a navigator on board is the Bhutan Air pilots, or Druk Air as you call them. Every other pilot who lands there has to have one of Bhutan Air pilots on board now. Bhutan Civil Aviation has made that a mandate, for one of the Bhutan Air pilots to be sitting between both the pilots who are actually flying into Paro and basically talk you down practically. Earlier, back in the heydays, I'm talking about 2008, 9, 10, all the way till probably 2015. If you did one flight with a Bhutan Air pilot, the first landing into Bhutan would be with the Bhutan Air navigator on board. Thereafter, your clearance would be valid for the next 11 months. You would be good to land into Paro for the next 11 months. So if you landed in the next 11 months, it gets renewed for the next 11 months. So it was that kind of clearance. So I have been a navigator on board for other Indian pilots because I was current to Paro. Back then, the Bhutan Civil Aviation would allow a pilot who's current and experienced to land into Paro can be on board instead of a Bhutan Air pilot. But now the rules have changed. Irrespective of who goes and lands over there, one of the Bhutan Air pilots will have to fly down wherever you are. He will brief you. He will be on board and practically talk you down, sitting behind you. Okay, descend here, turn left, turn right, that kind of stuff. Most of the modern day simulators also have approaches cleared for Paro. Now there is something called an RNP, required navigation performance authorization required. It's basically a GPS approach into Paro. What the technology available now is that you can practically fly through the valley with the autopilot engaged till the final turn. What the Bhutan Air pilot would have been talking you through can be done with aircraft systems which are so precise with satellite-based augmentation guidance as well as ground-based augmentation systems. So you can do that approach without a pilot. That requires simulator training and then some supervised training before you are released and authorized to do that approach into Paro. Even Kathmandu now has RNPAR approach, which is basically a GPS approach where you are flying through the valley and coming onto the finals in Kathmandu instead of flying over the highest point in the ridge and thereafter basically doing a very steep approach till 3 miles and then reducing the rate of descent. So into Kathmandu, you would be initially descending at about 1400 feet per minute once you cross that ridge and getting down to 700 feet per minute at about 2 to 3 miles. So double the rate of descent. You're doing a 5-6 degree, angle of glide into the valley, Kathmandu bowl, and thereafter getting down to 3 degrees, which is your standard approach glide. So whereas Paro practically is seat of the pants flying, and if you were to do a missed approach into Paro, you basically climb out and go into another bowl where you do 360 degrees turn and try and make an approach from the opposite runway. So winds are always fast changing because there are two valleys merging. You could have tailwinds at one point of time. You could have crosswinds. You could have clouds moving in very quickly. So it's one of the most challenging airfields I've landed into.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Captain Kishore. That was extremely insightful. I'm sure, Vignesh, you got more of a detailed answer than you asked for from Captain Kishore. Really appreciate that. And that is very interesting. My only follow-up kind of a question which got me curious was, do pilots really get excited about something like that landing in a in a place like Paro, or is it something they deter away from, generally speaking?
I haven't come across a pilot who deters away from a challenging airfield where it's the adrenaline which drives us. It's always an opportunity I would never let go. I haven't come across a single pilot who would say, "Hey, listen, I'm not up to it. I don't want to go into Paro." I mean, it's a great experience to fly into challenging airfields.
Excellent. Okay, that definitely answers to you, Vignesh. While we continue to have more of such questions from your side, any comments you want to share, please do feel free to either put it up on LinkedIn or YouTube while you're listening to us. I'm going to move into another interesting question. Now, very recently, it's just been 10 days. And even though people mentally kind of in their lives move on, it is very hard to digest what has happened with AI 171. Now, when I was studying a little bit about you, Captain Kishore, you did mention in one of your tweets that somewhere in 2019, you yourself experienced an air crash, and which was a massive one. Can you share with us what happened and how did you yourself survive the crash along with others on that plane?
So the details of the crash per se are pretty much available on Google. So to cut the long story short, it was a Citation XL aeroplane, Cessna Citation XL. It was a business jet with 8 seats. We were flying in the airplane from Delhi early in the morning at about 7 o'clock from Delhi to Aligarh, a small 4,500 foot strip owned by the UP Civil Aviation Department. And our company had a maintenance hangar over there. The purpose was maintenance at that airfield. And the only passengers we had on board were 4 aircraft technicians of our own company and carrying some equipment for the maintenance purpose. So it was a nice bright day. Took off from Delhi. As we were on approach into Aligarh, there was a visual approach into Aligarh. Just probably the last I remember was crossing about 50 feet of altitude on the radio altimeter. It comes up on your primary function display. So I just glanced inside. Below 100 feet, you're basically focusing on the runway and looking out to the runway threshold. So the pilot flying would be primarily focusing on flying the aeroplane to the runway. So my last glance was inside, probably at about 50 feet, crossing that. I don't know at what altitude, but I later got to know from the flight data recorder and the inquiry that we hit a high tension cable strung across the undershoot of the runway from a electric substation on the right side of the airfield at 23 feet height, which is your average electric pole height. So they'd strung across a 33,000 volt live cable of a thickness of probably 2 to 3 inches across the undershoot of the actual runway, and from a 60-foot pylon to electric height, and strung it across, and then it was supplying electricity to 100 odd villages north of Aligarh. So there were a couple of flying school operating from Aligarh. They were well aware of it. For reasons beyond my comprehension, the chief flying instructor who gave us clearance to land did not caution us about that wire. It was a systemic, failure of a whole lot of people. That's why we call it human factors. So somebody forgot to tell the crew. Somebody thought the crew would already know from their prior experience. So if what actually happened was that cable was there, and we probably had about 5 degrees angle of bank, so it hit the left undercarriage, and it sheared off the left undercarriage in totality. Sitting in the cockpit, all that I heard was a loud metallic sound, and the aircraft putting on about 45-50 degrees angle of bank. You can imagine at 23 feet height, that's on the average, the ceiling of your home would be about probably 10 to 11 feet.
10 to 11
just
feet,
twice
yes.
that height. Just twice that height, having in 45-50 degrees angle of bank. And at my peripheral vision, I could see sparks flying on the left side. Uh, all that I had time was to just get the wings level and touch down on the center of the extended portion of the runway. And after that, because we didn't have the left wheel, we just went off the runway. We had the presence of mind from our training to switch off the engines quickly, and uh, we it was just providence that we hit another rock or something. So from going at 90 degrees parallel to the runway, we hit that rock and probably swiveled further to 270 degrees, and we were now hurtling uh, towards the boundary wall with the left wing on fire, just watching the boundary wall come towards me. And later, the inquiry, I think the measured distance between the nose of the aeroplane and the boundary wall was probably about 19 inches. That's a foot and a half. So that's
My God.
how close we were to hitting that boundary wall and probably exploding. Uh, the other good part was that the runway shoulder was wet from 3 days of rain. So the fuel which had come out of the airplane did
Yep.
not ignite immediately.
Fortunate.
We had, instead of passengers, we had aircraft technicians on board who didn't panic. So while I fired the fire extinguishers on the engines, the co-pilot jumped out of the cockpit and they managed to kick open the main door by about 2.5 feet. And all of us crawled out within 30-40 seconds. And we would have walked about 50-60 feet, rather run 50-60 feet in the slushy side of the runway. And then the aircraft exploded in flames.
My God.
So
That's
it
scary,
it
to say the
sounds
least.
a little filmy, or I can sit back now and think that damn, I was that close to uh, you know uh, being not here to tell the tale. Uh, that's another version that the first time I ever realized post military that PTSD is a thing.
Yes.
We all talk about being strong and all that, but as luck would have it, COVID stuck after that. So
Hmm.
everyone was sitting at home,
Hmm.
and that was probably a blessing in disguise. Lot of people say COVID affected them. For me, it was a blessing in disguise that I was at home, I was with family, my support system. So that
Hmm.
definitely helped me. I have no shaming saying that I did undergo therapy, but end of the day, I thought more than the therapy which I ditched, it was my self belief to put myself out there that I have to divert my mind to ensure the thoughts of self doubt or the aftermath of the crash uh, to not let it affect me. It's been a journey to get back to flying, but yes, I've flown two different airplanes after that, much uh, more bigger and more faster airplanes, which I fly right now. So yeah, that's the long story short. Yes, like they say, if the pilot's alive, blame him. If he's not there, then fix him. So I did get fixed. That's another story to tell. I was blamed for, and I lost my license for 12 months, but no regrets. That's how the system works. A
Interesting.
lot of people out there might believe that I was to blame, but the mere fact that I'm here to tell the tale and not a single person lost their life in that crash, I think is testimony to itself that every single time on 27th of August, my support system, my friends, my family, everyone wishes me my second birthday, 27th of August 2019, and all those on board call me up. Uh, for me, they treat me like God. It's it's a great level. Having someone say, "Sir, we are alive because you were the pilot that day."
There was
So
the presence of
it's a moment of pride for me. Uh, it's not something to gloat about, but yes, I saved myself, and everyone else on board that airplane is alive today.
awesome. I mean, commendable. All I can say is, it sounds like a movie, no doubt about it. We have seen enough movies. To our audience who are watching us, do go on to Captain Kishore's X account and do see some of those images which are there. And they are hard to believe, they are hard to digest. That when you see some of those images, it is really difficult to fathom the fact that Captain Kishore himself is speaking with us today, and the entire technical crew, the technicians which were there with him, also walked out alive from what had happened. So, thank you so much for sharing with us in
And
detail.
Vaishnav, uh, a lot of people have told me, why do you have those pictures over there? I said, those pictures, it's my personal account. Those pictures are a constant reminder for me how blessed I am. You
True.
know, some people say, no, it might be triggering. No, I said, those pictures are what I draw inspiration every time something in my life happens and I feel dejected. I say, hey, listen, you survived that, boss. This is nothing. So for me, it's inspiring. So a lot of people have said, no, you shouldn't have it over there. I've had people send me DMs. Some even openly call me out, saying that you're gloating over, crashing an aeroplane. I said, that's your viewpoint. For me, that's my inspiration that I survived that. So nothing else can affect me.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that is the way forward, because at the end of the day, it is an inspiration not only to you, to a lot of others, that there is hope. There is something which can definitely happen positively if we look at it. But while we are at it, I wanted to follow it up with a question. So, when there is an emergency situation, I'm sure you have seen a few, you've experienced one yourself, which you explained in detail. When you're flying a plane, can you tell us what goes through a pilot's mind and heart, even though they are trained? I know pilots are extremely very well trained, they have the flying hours behind them, but as you know, emergency situations don't happen daily. The aircrafts are very well equipped technically. So when an emergency situation happens, what goes through a pilot's heart, mind at that very moment?
So Vikram, without an emergency, trust me, there have been enough tests done on with sensors on pilots. When you take off and you land, this is called the most critical phases of flight. You
Mhm.
know, the heart rate of most pilots could cross probably 300, 400.
My God.
You know, so that's how uh, when I say adrenaline, that's how high the adrenaline is rushing through your heart at that point of time. It's a positive adrenaline. If in emergency, it's calling upon every single flight you've done, experience which you gained, and the training which you've undergone to identify and fly the airplane first. So in pilot language, we call it aviate, navigate, communicate. When you say
Mhm.
aviate, you fly the airplane first, irrespective of the nature of emergency. Thereafter, you navigate the airplane, and then you communicate to outside agencies. So whenever there's an emergency, there are critical emergencies. We call it, red emergencies. There are amber emergencies. Which basically, we won't call them emergency, they're caution. So
Mhm.
whenever there's a red warning in light in the cockpit, you identify it, you cancel that warning. There are some memory actions to be done in each airplane. You do those, you continue flying the airplane safely, and once the aircraft is under control, is when you take out the abnormal checklist and go through the checklist. Does anything else need to be done? In most cases, you can engage the autopilot, take a deep breath, have a swig of water for all I care,
Mhm.
and inform the outside agencies like the radar or the ATC. that you would like a path where you are not disturbed while you troubleshoot the emergency. Go through the checklist. The checklist will clearly tell you what is to be done, whether you need to return back or some corrective actions in the cockpit to be done, or you may be able to continue the flight with some degradations which you have to keep a watch out for. All that will be written down in your checklist, and you would have practiced those in the simulator as well. So that's predominantly what any pilot would undergo during training, and in a live situation of an emergency, that's what they would be doing.
Okay. Okay. Excellent. I mean, there is a very clear methodology what they go through. That having said that, and having reached to that, I'm going to get into a couple of little sensitive questions, Captain Kishore. We have seen upteen movies. I'm a movie buff myself. We watch movies in which the pilot calls for Mayday, Mayday. And I'm sure it happens in real life also. It has happened in the recently ill-fated AI-171 crash. Can you tell us technically, at what point in time does the pilot decide to make that call eventually? Where does the decision-making point come to say it's Mayday, Mayday, and that's it?
So Vikram, practically anyone who would just Google the word Mayday would know that its origin is from a French word Mayday, which basically means help me. The word Mayday used to be used to convey to all the outside agencies, hey, listen, I need help. I am in a critical emergency. Okay. One, it tells the people around you in the air, hey, listen, this aircraft, stay away from this aircraft. So it gives you a clear airspace, no conflict. The ATC or the radar will keep all other airplanes away from you. There should be radio silence once a pilot gives a Mayday call. That means you don't want anyone, giving radio calls if that pilot needs assistance. So it does three things. One is awareness for everyone around that this aircraft is an emergency. Two, it tells the ground control, the radar or the ATC that please keep all other aircraft away from this aircraft and maintain radio silence, so that if he needs to convey anything or if he needs some assistance, he will give you further calls. And third, it is heightened awareness that, okay, listen, now we need to, we've done the part of the aviate, we've done the part of navigate, we've communicated. Now let's take the checklist and see how to handle this emergency. That's the scenario of how Mayday call is used. So as a layman, anyone who hears Mayday, it's not just in aviation, it's used in shipping also. Even they give Mayday calls. So it's you repeat it thrice, Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. You give your aircraft position, altitude, speed, number of souls on board, and how much fuel you have for endurance, this basic information. Or like in the case of Air India 171, they did not have enough time or the luxury of giving out further information. All that we know as of now is that they gave a Mayday call. What was the full nature of the Mayday call? There are speculative news reports that he said lost thrust, going down, and blah blah blah. All that will only come out once the AIB analyzes the data of the cockpit voice recorder and stuff like that.
Okay. When we fly as a normal human being who's in the flight, there is turbulence. And when there is turbulence, we all feel, is the plane at 14,000 feet above sea level or 33,000 feet above sea level? You get scared as a non-pilot. You kind of wonder what is going to happen, especially when they go through the clouds and there's a bit of turbulence. Now, at that point in time, people look at each other, families look at each other. does the pilot really worry, or it's a normal day in the office for the pilot, even though the seatbelt sign is on, obviously for security reasons? But does the pilot at that point in time really worry anything, or it's just like, it's okay, it's my normal day at work, I'm just going to get through this? What happens then?
Okay, if it's a known area of turbulence, most pilots would have already turned on the seatbelt sign. The main cause of worry is if you hit a turbulence patch without the seatbelt sign turned on, which means
Okay.
you have passengers or crew back in the cabin who are not secure. So if you hit a turbulent patch, it is dangerous for them. Articles could fly. There have been cases where people have lost their lives because they broke their neck. So that's the first cause of concern. So you're not worried about yourself. You're strapped up in the cockpit. It's another day. Like you said, yes, definitely. I won't worry about turbulence. It's not something that this aircraft is going to fall out of the sky. It's just a mass of air going up and down. It's updrafts, downdrafts. People have been through roller coasters. They scream their hearts out and enjoy that. But in an airplane, they would start remembering God. So that's human psychology for you. When they know that in a roller coaster, it's going to happen. It's a known, event. In an airplane,
Yes.
it's an unknown event. So the startle effect is what causes people to start getting into a zone where they start panicking. But no, the aircraft is definitely not going to fall out of sky. In most cases, modern day weather radars will give you adequate warning that this area has got turbulence. But still, there is something called clear air turbulence. When warm air and cold air meet, they form, a circulation of air where the mass of air can move up and down probably a few thousand feet. So there are various methodologies to predict these zones of turbulence. There are ways and means. If an aircraft hits turbulence, every single pilot will call it out to the radar that, hey, listen, we are experiencing, moderate or severe turbulence, light, moderate, or severe turbulence. And every aircraft on that route knows that at 30,000 feet, the aircraft ahead reported moderate turbulence. So you know that you're good. So what would an aircraft coming behind him would do? Would ask for a lower level or a higher level. So let's say from 30,000 feet onwards, every aircraft at 2,000 feet interval is reporting turbulence. You know that it's unavoidable. It's going to be a rough ride. You turn on the seatbelt to inform the passengers, stop service, everyone sit down. You just run through it, few, 10, 20, 30, 40 miles, whatever is the duration, and you get out of it, and then, you turn on the seatbelt sign. Yeah. But if it was avoidable, you climb up or descend or take a detour by a few hundred miles for all you care, so that your passengers are, comfortable. In a modern day airline aircraft, they may not have the luxury of fuel to probably go, on a Delhi Mumbai leg. You wouldn't want to go all the way till Nagpur and then go back to Mumbai, right? So it is not an event which demands that kind of. Maybe in a corporate jet, I would probably do that, because my passenger comfort comes first. They don't care how much fuel we burn. Their comfort. So if I had a way, I would probably go those 200 miles to ensure passenger comfort. But like I said, our realm and the sector of flying is different. But in an airline aircraft, I don't think there's anything to worry. It's just another day in office. Yes, there are times when it can get really severe. That's when you start worrying in terms of whether you need to continue that route or climb or descend. That's where that's all you can do.
Okay. Very nice. Interesting. Very interesting. which kind of just continues in the flow to the next question. I'm sorry, I'm going to just ask you a barrage of questions. I hope you're fine with that at this point.
No sweat, no sweat.
Much easier than flying a plane. I must say that.
No, flying a plane is easier. Trust me.
In a very simplistic and non-technical way, can you share with us how technologically advanced are the planes, whether it's a Boeing or it's an Airbus, especially something like a 787 Dreamliner or an Airbus 380 or even the Hawker 4000 or the Beechcraft? How technology advanced they are in a layman's term? How would a layman understand, oh, wow, they are technology advanced. We don't have to really worry, especially the bigger ones.
Well, let's talk about the Dreamliner because it's in the news. Okay.
Yes. Okay.
It's a flying computer. To simply put it in layman's terms. Okay. The number of sensors, the level of digitization, every single aspect is controlled through various computers. We only talk about the aircraft. I'll come to the cockpit later. Every single system has probably, if not double redundancy. Some systems have triple redundancy. Some systems have quadruple redundancy. That means you have a main system, you have standby, standby to standby, and standby to standby to standby. So that will give you insight into how safe these airplanes are. You know, when people call out this airplane and say that, oh, it might have been a software issue. Before they put that software, yes, I'm not discounting the fact, okay, it might be a software issue. Yes, in your phone, you could just turn off everything and you could probably turn it back on and, oh, voila, everything works. The most advanced iPhone, oh, the screen's frozen. Damn. The simplest hack, you call up the Apple customer service and say, just turn it off, boss. Wait for 2 minutes and turn back everything. Everything works fine. Yes. You don't have that luxury in the air. So airplanes go through such extensive testing that an event of such magnitude of any software glitch, the acceptable range would be 1 in probably 10 billion. The probabilities, if you want to work out, that is what the safety requirements are before an airplane is certified. Correct. Boeing may want to sell it off and say, okay, listen, our probability is just 1 in a million. It won't be acceptable to the Federal Aviation Administration for certification processes. Okay, so the safety standards for certifying an airplane, if an airplane has to be certified, are at the highest possible level. So the modern day airplanes, to give you, let's move to the cockpit, the 787 is fully fly-by-wire. That means in a Cessna 152 in a flying school, probably if you move the yoke, what the rate at which you're pulling the yoke would be transmitted to the controls directly. But on a fly-by-wire, I can hold the yoke into my stomach, but based on your speed, based on your weight, based on various other factors, the yoke will only move what the computer tells it to move. So those are the safety standards built. It's a flight control compensation system. I may want to, with the system working as it's designed to work, I may want to make a mistake, but the system has a compensatory factor, So the slats, the leading edge flaps, as we call them, on the 787 has something called an auto gap slat system. That means if the flaps setting is not to 0, it is 1, 5, whatever, should the speed start reducing, the leading edge slats will continue starting extending to increase the camber. that means the wing area surface, to
Hmm.
generate more lift. So one system might be failing, but there's another system trying to compensate for it. So that's how safe. I heard one more theory. Okay, fuel contamination. There are multiple sensors in those wings for all of them to get clogged and all of them to sense same contaminant, whether it was of water or vapor or some dirt. I mean, it's humanly incomprehensible that if that actually happened, it is those 1 in billion kind of situation. It is sad that it happened on Air India 171. It is sad that it happened in India. When the aviation industry is on upscale graph, we have close to 1,200 aeroplane on order between two of the largest airlines, between Air India and Indigo. So we are on the world map right over there. We building new airfields, the new runways as as of every month practically. So we're right there. So somebody say, "Oh, sabotage angle." Well, okay, if you believe science fiction movie that okay, someone sitting on a laptop hacked into the Boeing 787 flight computer and crashed. Well, if we've reached that level of AI, well, maybe. I mean, 1 in 10 billion chance. Okay, I would like to be proven wrong that these airplanes are practically uncrashable. I mean, I might want to do it, but the aircraft
Right.
systems as well do. So on the Boeing 787 in the cockpit, you have something called a head-up display. You've got a glass panel which is in front of the pilot's eyesight, where all the data which you need to fly the airplane on the primary function display where you would be looking is up there. You really don't have to even look down. Imagine the situational awareness. So these airplanes, modern day airplanes, are incomprehensible in terms of you practically become system managers. On the 787, you can engage autopilot at 200 feet. What's 200 feet? I mean, it's nothing. And all of them are capable of auto land, auto brakes, you name it. That means you sitting and watch the airplane land on its own and start applying brakes on its own, and below a certain speed, you say, okay, now I'll take over. I'll get there. Maybe in future you'll probably have auto taxi. There are already auto taxi bots. You clear off the runway and then the taxi bot will come and attach itself, and then you're sitting and watching it take the airplane to the designated stand. So that's where technology is reaching, boss. We're trying to reduce emissions by reducing the carbon footprint, by ensuring the engines run lesser and lesser while on ground. So we're reducing fuel consumption, you're reducing carbon footprint, you're reducing noise pollution due to those engines run. So we are on a roadmap phenomenal in terms of technology.
Interesting. Very nice. Very nice. I'm also conscious while you're sharing such a lot of wealth of information, Captain Kishore, we are on the hour, but I still would like to borrow 15 minutes of your time, if you don't mind, because there are at least a couple of more questions I would definitely like to ask you, if that's fine with you.
No problem, sir. No problem.
Okay, fantastic. So that's extremely informative. And then continuing from there, as we all are aware, unfortunately, Captain Sumit Sabharwal, First Officer Clive Kundar had only 6 to 8 seconds out of the total kind of response time of 32 seconds once the flight took off. Can you share with us what, according to you, must have gone through their minds during those crucial seconds, obviously, as a pilot? And what is the role of a captain and what is the role of a first officer in such a scenario, if you can share?
Okay, Vikram, it would be unfair for me to uh, speculate what was going through the minds of Captain Sumit Sabharwal or Captain Clive. They're not here with us. With due respect to them, I would not like to comment or even think of commenting on what went through their minds. But all that I can say is that The truth will come out once the flight data recorder, the cockpit voice recorder, and all other elements will be downloaded by the AIB. I am not an expert by any means on that aeroplane. I am not qualified to fly that aeroplane. But purely as a pilot, if I were to experience something catastrophic like those pilots would have experienced, let's just speculate for a while. They experienced something which led them to give a mayday call. That is confirmed, at least. We all know that there
Yes.
was a mayday call. So, if on the average, on a takeoff roll, I just lift off from the ground, the pilot who's not flying. Why I say pilot not flying and the pilot flying is that takeoff can be done by the pilot on the right seat or the pilot on the left seat. So in aviation terminology, we have terminology of pilot flying and pilot not flying. So on the average, let's assume that today, for the sake of understanding, the left seat pilot was the pilot flying for that particular day. You lift off, the pilot not flying, once he sees the rate of climb positive at about 400-500 feet per minute, it's steady. He says positive rate. He might say positive rate of climb, but the general terminology is positive rate. Once he calls out positive rate, it's an indication, because the pilot flying is looking at only the indication over there to fly the airplane. He's at his peripheral view, he can check what is the rate of climb, but he's concentrating on flying. So once the co-pilot or the pilot not flying is ascertained that the aircraft is positively climbing away from the ground, positive rate, the pilot flying calls out gear up. And the pilot not flying raises the undercarriage handle and the gear starts going up. This is a sequence of events to understand as a layman what goes on in the cockpit in that little bit of time which the aircraft was flying before it started rate of descent. Okay. So if something catastrophic had to go wrong, the moment my wheels lifted off, let's discount a little bit of startle effect. Like we said, in a roller coaster, you know that the event is going to happen. Same way as a pilot, we are human beings. No matter how much of training we undergo, there will be a startle effect where you see a warning chime or a warning horn or light come on, which warrants a mayday call. That means if I was there and I saw that my red warning light went off, I don't know why it came on. So I'm going to continue flying. I'm going to tell the pilot not flying, while in my peripheral vision, I'm going to look out why what's happening. He's going to cancel that warning, because if multiple failures are happening, each of them will trigger a warning. So why we cancel that is, you identify which is the first failure which has happened, you cancel. It might be followed up by another failure, another failure, another failure. Sometimes when your engines fail, you have multiple associated failures. One is an engine failure. You might have a fire. You might have your generators failing. So it would be a string of failure. Ding, 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 ding. So many things would be happening. So the pilot not flying is constantly, identifying, cancel. Why the pilot flying is continuing to fly the airplane. A lot of people saying, why was the undercarriage wrong? Why was the undercarriage? The basic principle of every pilot, you are taught, ingrained, aviate. That means fly the airplane first was. If those engines were producing thrust, even with those undercarriage down, it will climb to whatever height you want to climb. So that's the last thing on my mind if I was flying the airplane, to touch the undercarriage. So first thing is to fly the airplane. So whatever happened, I'm sure those two pilots did everything in their might and their knowledge and their experience to try and fly that airplane safely. and we can only estimate that whatever led to that tragic crash was beyond anyone's control. The human factor angle can be estimated. Human factors could be anything, like we already discussed. It's not just the
Yeah.
pilots.
Yep.
Human factors can be multitude. So we don't know whether it was human factor, technical factor leading to human factor. It could be multiple combinations.
Great. Thanks. And that kind of leads to, there is tons of information which is available on Google, on the black box or the flight recorder, like they say. But from a pilot's perspective, what is a black box, and what is the reason there is so much of trust in it as a single source of truth? What happens in such a scenario?
Okay, I'm sure everyone's read it on Google already. The black boxes are not black in color, and
Yes.
the reason they were started being called black boxes was in yesteryears, especially during the World War. They used to use magnetic tapes, like your VCR tapes, So
Hmm.
to ensure that they're not exposed to bright light, which would probably erase the data on it, they were stored in black boxes and taken away to a safe dark place, because that's how films are stored.
Hmm.
Camera films or any data electromagnetic based films. So that's the reason they were called black boxes. So as the advent moved forward, that term continued to remain, that the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder continue to be called the black boxes, but they are orange in color. On the 787, they are called the enhanced airborne flight recorders,
Okay.
and they are a combined version. Each of them, they're dual, so there's basically redundancy. Each unit can record both the cockpit voice as well as the flight data. The number of parameters it can record, it's probably a few thousand. And in normal case, there's one in the tail and one in the nose section for redundancy. For a day-to-day monitoring purpose, you could just plug in Ethernet cable onto the one of the wing panels and just download the data. You really don't need to remove the flight recorders. A
Okay.
lot of people also, why are they not being able to get the data out of these recorders? Why are they damaged? They're designed to withstand 3,400 against the gravity. That is the amount of force it is can sustain up to 1,000 degrees or more of temperature. It has a underwater locator beacon. Even if it is submerged in water for up to 30 days, it will continue giving you signals for you to locate it. So they're so advanced and so robust. It's probably the most strongest part, more than the aircraft airframe. That's how they're built. So uh, that's how sensitive the data which they carry. That's required in case of any eventuality. So these recorders can be downloaded on lab bench. They're solid state drives, like your hard drives on a computer. And I'm sure the data will be downloaded and analyzed against a timestamp. There are softwares for you to put together the data. The voice, basically, when we say voice, it is
Hmm.
what the pilots are speaking, what the ATC transmission, the area mic will pick up every single oral warning. Let's say there was a warning, ding ding ding, it'll pick that up also. So audio with the data with the timestamp will be plotted, and you can reconstruct the entire flight from the time it started moving on its own power. Every single parameter would be there. What was the taxi speed? What was the engine power? What was the engine temperature? What was the outside air temperature? You know, whether the seatbelt sign was on, off. Every single thing will be recorded, and it will be plotted, and that is how the investigation will progress. Uh, And it's not just these recorders which will decide how the investigation progresses. There is a whole lot of other stuff which happens, to assess the damage on the aircraft. There are ways and means to assess whether a particular part got damaged on impact with the ground, or did it get damaged prior to impact. There are ways and means to gauge the metal stress. There are ways and means to uh, uh, find out whether a particular part was burning before impact or it started burning after impact. So all these metal stress and metal damage will give various clues to what exactly happened, and they will all be analyzed and put together for coming out with a final verdict.
Report. Okay. Very interesting. Thank you. I learned a lot from this. So it is fair to say that it is a single source of truth in an incident like this.
I won't say single source of truth, but yes, one of the important aspects of knowing what exactly went about and what could have happened.
Okay. And conscious of time, we are moving ahead quite fast. I still have a lot to ask, but I'll strict myself to two last questions, and then we have a little rapid fire round. Irrespective of the risk involved, being a pilot and flying in the air is something many youngsters get lured to and is a great career option. What would be your top three key tips for someone planning to pursue a career in this space or has just started flying? Any top three tips based on your rich experience in this space?
My first tip would be, if you're joining aviation for the glamour and the money, don't.
Enjoy.
The glamour and money will last you only an X amount of time, but the passion for flying is what will carry you forward. That's my first tip. A lot of youngsters come and they can't withstand the rigors of. This is one career where you have to constantly upgrade your skills. Every time you change a particular type of aircraft, you go back to the books, learning every nut and bolt. No doctor would ever do that. No software engineer would ever do that, because once they're in a particular field, they're only upgrading their skills on that particular field. It could be AI, it could be coding. A cardiac surgeon will learn new skills on how to, do a cardiac surgery. But as a pilot, every time you change a flying machine, you're back to square one. Yes, you know that, okay, you raise the yoke, it will go up, it will lower it, it will go down. That's at best your basic flying skills. But you go back to the drawing board every time. So there is no end to learning. It's probably the only profession where you have to prove your proficiency twice a year. Every 6 months, you got to go back into that simulator, prove your worth that you can handle every single emergency which is thrown at you. We're not talking about just engine failure. You're talking about, hydraulic failures. You're talking about fire. You name it. Every 6 months. Can you believe it? Which other profession needs you to prove that you're worthy of being in that profession every 6 months? So that's the level of, hard work which you need to put in. Yes, the perks are many, but if you want to come into this profession, passion is a must, and trust me, that passion will pay you in multifold ways, and you will not regret.
Okay, that's tip number
For me,
one.
I mean, the joy of flying, every single time the wheels leave that ground, trust me, I feel blessed that I'm a pilot and I'm among the few in this world who get to fly a flying machine. It's like a renewed love affair every single time the leaves leave the ground. Trust me. That that adrenaline rush is something which is unbeatable, and especially if you do it at early morning, where you get to see the first rays of sunrise from the air. It's
Yeah,
it's
beautiful.
unbelievable.
I can imagine. Beautiful, beautiful. With that note, and also being conscious of time, I'm going to wrap up the questions which we had for you. And they were really, really inclusive, exclusive insights from a very pilot's perspective. You got really into the details, extremely informative, and it kind of brings end to the invigorating discussion. And a special thanks to you, Captain Kishore. You've been extremely patient with me, if I were to say the least, in terms of answering to them in a layman's language for not only me, the live audience, and also the audience which will watch it later, for them to again understand what comes through a pilot's perspective. Before we wrap up today's episode, living true to our tradition, we will have a rapid fire round in which we ask five rapid fire questions, only five, to know a little bit more about our guest speaker, but nothing, not necessarily something to his profession. So, are you ready for those five rapid fire questions?
Yes, I am. Please go ahead.
Okay. As you have flown across the globe, which, according to you, is the best country you have personally experienced?
Well, the best country I personally experienced would be India. I know it's a little bit of a low downer, but I think the kind of places I've had the privilege to land into, whether it's Shimla or Kullu Manali or Srinagar, there are a bunch of airfields which are really fascinating. But as a place per se, outside of India, I think Vienna takes the cake. It's
Okay.
a lovely place, fraught with history and museums, and you could probably spend a few days if you're a history geek at that place. So
Oh,
yeah, that takes the cake for me in terms of one of the airfields I've landed into.
okay. Okay. Interesting. Very nice. Who is your question number two? Who is your idol in life and why?
My idol in my life has always been my mom.
Okay.
Without blinking an eyelid, uh, I could always say. I mean, I've been an atheist for probably 4 decades of my life, of 5 decades, for various personal reasons. But for me, my go-to person every time the chips are down is my mother. She was a homemaker all through, but she's a she's a woman who learned how to drive when she was 48 years old, because she wanted to personally drive my dad to the hospital when he needed Medicare for he had a stroke and he needed constant physiotherapy and stuff. For a homemaker to learn how to drive, learn how to handle banking uh, at that ripe age takes a lot of character, and I draw inspiration from her in more ways than one.
Okay. Awesome. Really love. Mother's love is nothing more. Can't ask for more. I really appreciate that. Going to the third rapid fire question. What does Captain Kishore himself indulge into to de stress, re energize, and reinvigorate himself?
De-stress would be, of course, time with family, and I love cooking,
Okay.
making a good meal, and uh, I know a lot of people might think alcohol is not a de-stressor, but yes, I do enjoy my good single malt when I'm not flying, and of course, having good friends around is great de-stressing.
Okay. Nice. Question number four. How would your friends describe you in three words?
Dependable, uh, always available when they need me, and a man of heart.
Okay, lovely. And the last question, you have a sweet tooth for which dessert?
Gulab Jamun.
Okay, very interesting. It's there on a dinner today, lunch today. It was there on a lunch today. I can quite relate to it, to be very honest. Excellent. So that was our 5 rapid fire questions, which gave us a bit more glimpse about you, Captain Kishore, more, and as a human, more than the profession you have been all throughout your career, which has been an excellent pilot. I really appreciate. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we do come to the end of our episode today, and we would like to sincerely thank Captain Kishore for willing to be the guest speaker, showcasing his availability at a short notice and sharing a pilot's perspective with a very open heart and with the exact right intentions. Captain Kishore, before we wrap it up, any parting words from yourself for the evening?
Before we wrap up, there's one thing I always said to everyone, not just the Air India 171 tragic accident, but hats off to every single person associated with aviation on that particular day who took back to the skies. Some who were on the ground at Ahmedabad, and once the airport opened up, imagine those pilots who flew that day out of the same very airfield, or those who landed where the black fumes were still, going up into the sky from the crash site. I mean, that takes character and that defines every single aviator. Not me, not anyone. The resilience of those cabin crew, the resilience of the ground staff, and the resolve of every single airline operator. Hats off to them. I mean, my heart goes out to everyone. Somebody was saying that one of the Air India pilots said he had a nervous breakdown or he didn't feel up to it at some airfield. We all human. Please treat us as humans. And I think that's the key takeaway that at the end of the day, we are all humans and live each day as it comes.
Okay, okay. No, I really appreciate that. I really appreciate that. That is something which has been, I can only feel for it as a human being. I think it is extreme resilience by the pilots. I can only imagine. But thank you so much, Captain Kishore, for putting it right up there on behalf of the pilots, on behalf of the entire community, of all the people. It's not only the pilots who fly the aircraft. I know whatever I have seen, there are tons of people which are involved just for a plane flying from a destination to another destination to ensure that the passengers are safe, the people are safe, and they have a great experience. So I can only imagine the resilience levels all of them have. And again, I would just like to thank you. To all the people who have watched us today, we would like to thank Captain Kishore. He did come up at a short notice, and the entire intention of these podcasts, this particular episode, has been just to have his views, a pilot's view from his perspective, and he's given us much more than we asked for. So thank you, everyone. We wish you all a pleasant rest of the day or the evening ahead. Until next time, from all of us at the Curious Mind series, good night. Take care, stay safe, and for the ones who continue to fly, like Captain Kishore and many others, we wish you a safe flight and your good journey ahead. Thank you so much. Thank you, Captain Kishore. Really nice to have you. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Vikram. Have a great day.
Thank you.